The biggest lie, and from maybe the one thing almost every character believes, that the town is a prison they are supposed to escape. What if escaping was never the real objective? What if the town does not exist to keep people trapped, but to make them choose to stay? That changes almost everything. Because look at the pattern. Every time someone gets close to leaving, the story does not simply put a wall in front of them. It gives them something more dangerous. A reason to turn back. A person they cannot abandon. A mystery they cannot ignore. A truth they desperately need to understand. And that may be the real design of the town. The monsters are terrifying, but they may not be the prison guards. The trees are strange, but they may not be the escape route. The lighthouse looks like an answer, but perhaps it is only another door inside the same system. The town may not be testing whether people can escape. It may be testing what they are willing to sacrifice when escape becomes possible. And this is where the story becomes much darker. Because if that theory is correct, then every failed escape in From means something completely different. Take the first major attempts to understand the town. People immediately search for practical answers. Roads, maps, electricity, food, communication, transportation. But the town constantly destroys that logic. The road loops, the forest changes, the trees move, the rules appear impossible. And every time the characters believe they have discovered a physical boundary, the mystery becomes psychological. That is not accidental. The town does not simply control where people can go. It controls what they believe they must do. That distinction matters. Because a normal prison needs walls. This place barely needs them.
Fear does the job. Hope does the job.
Love does the job. And sometimes curiosity does the job even better. That is why characters like Jade, Tabitha, Victor, Boyd, and others keep moving deeper into the mystery even when they know it could destroy them. They are not merely trying to survive. They are trying to understand. And perhaps that is exactly what the town wants. But here's what changes everything. What if the mysteries are not distractions from the escape? What if the mysteries are the mechanism preventing escape? Think about the bottle trees. At first, they appear to be clues. Then they become connected to impossible locations and strange patterns. Then the story starts suggesting that objects, memories, symbols, and places may be connected across different points in time. The audience naturally asks, how does this help them get home? But maybe that is the wrong question. Maybe the correct question is, why does the town keep giving them clues? A prison that gives its prisoners clues about the prison is strange. Unless the clues are not meant to help them leave. Unless the clues are meant to keep them searching. And searching creates something the town desperately needs: engagement. The more a character investigates, the deeper they become emotionally connected to the mystery. The deeper they become connected, the harder it becomes to simply walk away. This is especially important with Tabitha. She reaches places that should represent progress. The lighthouse, the children, the strange visions, the connection between the past and present. But every answer creates another question. That is the pattern. An ordinary mystery gives you answers until you reach the solution. From gives you answers that create obligations. Every revelation demands another journey, another risk, another sacrifice. And this is where it gets darker. What if the town's greatest weapon is not the monsters outside the houses? What if it is the belief that one more answer will finally make everything make sense? That belief has controlled almost every major investigation. Jade keeps digging. Tabitha keeps searching. Victor keeps remembering. Boyd keeps pushing forward. And the moment one person gets close to understanding something, another mystery appears. It feels like progress. But perhaps it is actually a loop. A psychological loop. The town gives people just enough truth to prevent them from giving up. Because complete hopelessness would be dangerous. If everyone believed there was absolutely no way out, they might stop playing the game. But hope keeps them moving. Hope makes them investigate. Hope makes them enter the forest. Hope makes them follow strange symbols. Hope makes them trust visions. Hope makes them believe the next door might finally be the exit. And maybe the town was built around that exact human weakness. This also gives the monsters a completely different purpose. Why do they smile? Why do they talk? Why do they sometimes behave as if they know exactly what the humans fear? because killing people may not be their primary objective.
Fear is.
The monsters don't simply attack bodies. They attack certainty. They make people question whether the rules they depend on are actually safe. They appear at windows. They whisper. They imitate familiar faces. They exploit emotional weaknesses. And most importantly, they make survival feel temporary.
But notice something.
The monsters do not need to kill everyone. In fact, the existence of survivors is essential. Someone has to keep wondering. Someone has to keep searching. Someone has to carry the mystery forward. And that makes the town feel less like a hunting ground and more like a system designed to maintain a certain psychological state. That is the detail everyone missed. The town does not seem interested in simply producing death. It seems interested in producing stories. Trauma,
Conflict. Hope.
desperation, sacrifice, and repeated choices. Every new arrival adds another variable to the experiment. A mother, a child, a skeptic, a believer, a leader, a broken person, a person who refuses to stop searching. And once those people enter the town, their relationships become more important than the physical geography. Because the ultimate trap may not be the road. It may be attachment. Imagine discovering tomorrow that the road finally works. You can leave, but your child is still inside. Would you go? Your friend is trapped. Would you go? You finally understand what happened to the people before you. Would you really walk away without knowing the ending? That is the kind of prison that does not need walls. And perhaps that is why From keeps putting characters in situations where escaping personally is never enough. Someone always remains behind. Someone always needs saving. Someone always has another piece of the puzzle. And that creates the central horror of the entire story. The exit may exist. But leaving may require becoming the kind of person the town wants you to become. Look at what the show is actually telling us. The characters do not simply fight against the environment. They fight against themselves. Their guilt, their memories, their grief, their need for answers, their fear of abandoning others, their obsession with finding meaning. And if the town understands those weaknesses, then the physical maze is only the surface. The real maze is psychological. That would explain why the most important discoveries often feel connected to memory, why the past keeps returning, why certain images repeat, why characters experience visions, why time itself seems unstable. Because if the town is testing people, then it needs to know one thing. How far can a human being be pushed before they stop choosing freely? And if Season 4 is continuing this pattern, then the biggest mystery may no longer be, how do they escape? It may be, who is deciding what they believe escape actually means? Because if the town controls the destination and controls the clues and controls the fear, then perhaps the final trap is not preventing the characters from leaving. Perhaps it is convincing them that they have finally found the way out when they are actually walking exactly where the town wanted them to go. And if that is true, then the lighthouse may not have been an escape. The bottle tree may not have been an escape. The faraway trees may not be an escape. They may all be pieces of one enormous path. A path designed not to lead people out, but deeper. And the terrifying question becomes unavoidable. If the town has been guiding them this entire time, who is waiting at the end of the path? The most dangerous possibility is that the town has never been reacting to the characters. It has been anticipating them. That is a completely different kind of horror. If the town were simply an unnatural place filled with monsters, then its behavior should be chaotic.
People arrive.
They make mistakes. The monsters attack. Survivors adapt. But From rarely feels that random. Again and again, the environment seems to respond to what the characters discover. They ask questions. Something answers. They become afraid. Something appears. They begin to understand a pattern. The pattern changes. And that creates a disturbing possibility. Maybe the town does not have one fixed set of rules. Maybe the rules are designed to keep the characters moving. That would explain why knowledge in From is always dangerous. Because knowledge does not simply make someone safer. Sometimes it makes them a target. Look at Jade. He is one of the clearest examples of someone who refuses to accept the surface explanation. He sees symbols. He sees impossible events. He sees things other people cannot see. And instead of running away from them, he keeps investigating. That should make him one of the people closest to escape. But what actually happens? The deeper Jade goes, the more complicated his reality becomes. His investigation does not lead toward a simple exit. It leads toward the past, toward repetition, toward visions, toward events that seem to exist outside normal time. And that is not a coincidence, because Jade's obsession may be exactly what the town needs. It gives him a purpose. And purpose is one of the strongest forms of captivity. A person who has nothing left to believe in can become unpredictable. But a person who believes they are one discovery away from solving everything, they will walk willingly into the darkness. That is why the town may not need to physically force its strongest investigators anywhere. It only needs to give them another question. One more symbol. One more vision. One more impossible coincidence. One more clue. And they will continue. That's not the real mystery. The real mystery is why the clues are so emotionally addictive. Why do they never feel random? Why do they always seem connected to something deeply personal? Because perhaps the town is not just showing people information. It is showing them the information they are least capable of ignoring. For Jade, that is the mystery itself. For Tabitha, it is the children. For Boyd, it is protecting the people around him. For Victor, it is memory. Different weaknesses. Same mechanism. The town identifies what matters to you and then turns it into a path. That is why Victor is so important. For years, Victor survives in a way that looks almost impossible. But surviving is not the same thing as escaping. Victor has learned the rules. He knows what the forest can do. He knows what darkness feels like. He understands that some things should not be followed. And yet, even Victor cannot completely escape the past. His memories keep dragging him backward. The old events remain alive inside him. And this gives us a disturbing interpretation of Victor's role. Maybe Victor is not simply the oldest survivor. Maybe he is evidence of what happens when someone stays inside the system for too long. He has survived. But survival has come with a price. His memories are fragmented. His understanding of time is unstable. His childhood trauma is inseparable from the town. He has adapted so completely that the boundary between Victor and the place itself almost disappears. And that may be the future waiting for everyone else. Not death. Something worse. Adaptation. Because imagine the town's ultimate victory isn't killing you. Imagine it is making you believe this place is your home. That would completely reframe Victor's story. He does not just represent the person who survived. He represents the person who stayed long enough for the prison to become normal. And this is where it gets darker. What if the town needs people like Victor? Not because they are prisoners, but because they are anchors. People who remember. People who carry information from one cycle to another. People who preserve fragments of what happened before. That could explain why memory is such a powerful theme. If the town operates through repetition, then memory becomes dangerous. Because remembering breaks the cycle, but forgetting protects it. And Victor has spent decades trying to survive while carrying memories he cannot fully explain. Perhaps that is why certain truths keep returning through different people. The same symbols, the same children, the same structures, the same impossible events, different faces, different generations, but similar patterns. That suggests something far bigger than a normal supernatural trap. It suggests recurrence. And if recurrence is real, then the people in the present may not be experiencing these events for the first time. They may be repeating them. That changes the meaning of every major discovery. The bottle tree is no longer just a strange object. It becomes a possible marker. The visions are no longer random hallucinations. They become fragments. The children are no longer simply victims. They become part of a larger cycle. And the monsters? They may be the result of that cycle rather than its creators. This distinction matters, because everyone naturally assumes the monsters are at the top of the hierarchy. They appear at night. They cannot be easily killed. They know things they should know. So, we assume they control the town. But what if they're only another layer? What if they are prisoners too? That would explain something deeply disturbing about their behavior. They do not behave like animals. They behave like people who understand the rules. They know they have time. They know the humans cannot escape easily. They know exactly how to create fear. And sometimes they seem almost amused.
Why?
Because perhaps they're not hunting for survival. Perhaps they are performing a role they have performed before. And maybe they once stood on the other side of the window. Maybe they once believed they could escape too. If that is true, then the monsters become tragic rather than simply evil. They could represent what happens when the system finally breaks a person completely. A human being stripped of everything except hunger, instinct, and obedience. And suddenly the smiling faces become much more terrifying. Because they may be looking at the humans and seeing their own past. They may know exactly where this road ends. That would also explain why the monsters sometimes speak instead of attacking. They are not always trying to kill. They are trying to communicate, to manipulate,
To tempt.
to create emotional reactions. And perhaps that is because fear itself is part of the mechanism. The town needs people emotionally engaged. A calm prisoner is difficult to control. A desperate prisoner is easy. A desperate prisoner will take risks. A desperate prisoner will follow impossible clues. A desperate prisoner will make sacrifices. And that brings us back to Boyd. Boyd's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. He cannot stop trying to save people. That makes him a leader. But it also makes him predictable. If the town can threaten the people Boyd loves, it can control his decisions without ever touching him. It does not need to tell Boyd where to go. It only needs to put someone he cares about in danger. And Boyd will choose the path for them. That is the psychological trap. The characters believe they are making independent choices. But their choices may have been engineered long before they realize it. And if the town is intelligent enough to understand human behavior, then every major tragedy becomes more suspicious. Was it really random? Or was someone being pushed into a specific decision? Was the monster attack simply an attack? Or was it designed to force someone toward another location? Was a vision a warning? Or was it bait? Was a supernatural door an opportunity? Or was it a controlled entrance? Look at what the show is actually telling us. Every time the characters think they are moving closer to freedom, they become more deeply connected to the mystery. That is the pattern. And patterns in From are rarely meaningless. The ultimate prison may therefore have 3 layers. The first layer is physical. The road loops. The forest traps them. The monsters control the night. The second layer is psychological. Fear controls their decisions. Love prevents them from abandoning others. Hope keeps them searching. And the third layer is something much worse. Meaning. The town makes people believe their suffering has a purpose. That they were brought there for a reason. That the children matter. That the symbols matter. That their choices matter. And once someone believes their suffering has meaning, they can endure almost anything. That may be the town's greatest weapon. Not fear.
Not death. Purpose.
Because if the characters eventually discover that they were never supposed to escape, then every sacrifice they made begins to look different. Every death, every rescue, every journey into the forest, every person who stayed behind. Maybe none of it was leading outward. Maybe it was all leading toward one final choice. And that brings us to the most terrifying possibility of all. What if the town does eventually offer them an escape? What if the door finally opens? What if the road finally stops looping? What if someone is finally told, "You can go home"? Would they actually leave? Or would the town have already changed them so completely that they no longer know what home means? Because if the entire purpose of the place is transformation, then escape was never the goal. The goal was to create something. And the people trapped inside may not be the prisoners. They may be the experiment. Which means the final question is no longer who built the town. It is much more terrifying. What is the town trying to turn them into? And now we reach the possibility that makes every previous clue feel different. What if the town was never designed to keep people inside forever? What if it was designed to produce a specific kind of person? Because once you look at From through that lens, the entire story starts to resemble a test. Not a simple test of survival. A test of choice. The town creates impossible situations and watches what people do when every option is terrible. Save yourself or save someone else. Tell the truth or protect someone. Follow the rules or risk everything for an answer. Accept the mystery or challenge it. And that may explain why the town constantly puts its characters into moral situations instead of simply killing them. Because if the only goal were death, there would be no reason to give them choices. But the choices are everywhere. And every choice changes them. That is the real transformation. At the beginning, people arrive thinking like ordinary human beings. They believe problems have practical solutions. If the road loops, find another road. If the monsters attack, build stronger defenses. If someone is missing, search for them. If there is a strange symbol, investigate it. But the town slowly destroys that worldview. It teaches them that logic alone is not enough. And once that happens, they become capable of doing things they never would have considered before. They enter forbidden places. They trust visions. They interact with supernatural forces. They sacrifice their safety for information. They begin making decisions based on patterns that nobody else can see. And perhaps that is exactly what the town wants. Adaptation. Not survival. Adaptation. That is why the characters who survive the longest are not necessarily the strongest. They are the ones who learn how to live with contradiction. They can accept that something impossible is happening without completely losing themselves. Victor is one example. Tabitha becomes another. Jade becomes another. Boyd becomes another. But none of them adapt in the same way. And that may be the point. The town is observing different responses to the same impossible environment. Fear produces one kind of person. Hope produces another. Obsession produces another. Love produces another. Trauma produces another. And eventually those personalities collide. That collision creates the drama. But perhaps it also creates the experiment's result. This gives the monsters another possible function. Maybe they are not simply there to eliminate survivors. Maybe they are there to apply pressure. Pressure reveals character. A person may appear compassionate when life is comfortable. But what happens when compassion becomes dangerous? A person may claim they would sacrifice themselves for others. But what happens when the sacrifice becomes real? A leader may say they can protect everyone. But what happens when protecting one person means condemning another? The town constantly creates these situations. And that is why its cruelty feels so deliberate.
It does not simply attack the body.
It attacks the identity. It asks, who are you when your rules stop working? Who are you when there is no good choice? Who are you when the person you love becomes the reason you might die? And here is the most disturbing possibility. Maybe the people who escape are not necessarily the winners. Maybe the people who escape are the ones who have completed the test. Think about what an actual escape would require. They would need to understand the rules, understand the symbols, understand the past, understand the supernatural forces, and most importantly, understand themselves. That means the escape might not happen when someone finds the correct road. It might happen when someone finally makes the correct choice. That would explain why physical escape routes keep failing. The characters are searching for a geographical solution to a psychological problem. They want a door. The town wants a decision. They want to go home. The town wants to know who they become when home is taken away. And this may be the hidden meaning behind the repeated emphasis on children, memory, and sacrifice. Children represent innocence. Memory represents the past. Sacrifice represents choice. Put those three things together and the story begins to look like a cycle designed around one question. Can people break a pattern without becoming part of it? That may be what the mysterious children represent. They are not simply clues to the mythology. They may represent the original failure. Something happened before. A choice was made. Someone was sacrificed. Something went wrong. And now the consequences continue. If the same pattern keeps repeating, then the current characters may have been brought into the system because they are capable of changing the outcome. But changing the outcome would require doing something different from everyone who came before them. And that is where the title of this theory becomes terrifying. It was never about escaping. Because if escaping were enough, someone would eventually find the road. Someone would eventually find the right tree. Someone would eventually find the right doorway. But perhaps the system is not asking, can you leave? It is asking, can you refuse to become what this place wants you to become? That is a much harder challenge. Because the town can survive walls being destroyed. It can survive monsters being killed. It can survive people discovering secrets. But what if it cannot survive someone breaking the psychological pattern? Someone who refuses revenge. Someone who refuses fear. Someone who refuses to sacrifice another person for their own freedom. Someone who refuses to play by the emotional rules the town creates. That could be the true meaning of breaking the cycle. Not destroying the monsters. Not finding a magical exit. But refusing the choice the town expects. And this is where Boyd becomes extremely important. Boyd's entire story is built around responsibility. He believes he must save everyone. That sounds heroic. But what if the town understands that belief? What if responsibility itself becomes a weapon? The more people Boyd loves, the more control the town has over him. Because he cannot simply walk away. And that means his greatest strength can also become his prison. The same thing happens to Tabitha. Her connection to the children gives her purpose. But purpose also pulls her deeper. Jade's search for meaning does the same thing. Victor's memories do the same thing. Every character has something that can be turned into a chain. And perhaps the final stage of the town's experiment is discovering whether they can recognize that chain. Not break it physically. Recognize it. Because you cannot escape a trap you do not realize you are inside. That may be why the characters are constantly given incomplete information. They need enough knowledge to keep moving. But never enough knowledge to understand the entire system. The town keeps them almost informed. And almost knowing the truth can be more powerful than ignorance. Because every answer creates another obsession. Every clue creates another question. Every question creates another journey. And every journey creates another opportunity for the town to change them. That is the loop. Not the road. The loop is inside the mind. And if Season 4 continues pushing the mythology toward its deeper truth, the final revelation may not be that someone built the town. It may be that the town has been repeating a process for generations.
Different people.
Different eras. Different tragedies. Same underlying test. And the reason nobody has escaped may be brutally simple. They have been trying to beat the wrong game. They have been searching for an exit, when they should have been searching for the rule that makes the exit unnecessary. Because perhaps the real escape is not physically leaving the town. Perhaps it is becoming someone the town can no longer control. And that would explain why the strongest characters are always placed under impossible emotional pressure. The town is waiting for them to make one particular kind of choice. A selfish choice. A fearful choice. A desperate choice. A choice that repeats the past. But what happens if, at the final moment, someone chooses differently? What happens if someone refuses to sacrifice another person? What happens if someone accepts losing their chance to escape rather than becoming part of the cycle? What happens if someone finally realizes that the town has been manipulating their definition of freedom from the beginning? That could be the moment everything breaks. And perhaps that is what the monsters are truly afraid of. Not weapons. Not daylight. Not stronger buildings. A person who understands the game. Because once you understand the game, you can stop playing it. And that leads to the final terrifying possibility. Maybe the town has never needed to keep everyone trapped. Maybe it only needs to keep them making the same choices. Again, and again, and again. Until eventually someone breaks. But if someone finally refuses, if someone chooses the opposite of what the town expects, then the cycle may finally collapse. And suddenly every mystery in From points toward the same horrifying conclusion. The road was never the prison. The monsters were never the entire threat. The forest was never the real maze. The real prison was the belief that freedom meant getting out. Because maybe the only way to escape from is to realize that the town has been deciding what escape means all along. And if that is true, then the final question is no longer whether our characters will find the exit. It is whether they will recognize the moment when the town finally gives them one. Because what if the final door opens and the person standing behind it is not there to let them leave? What if the door is there to see who walks through? And what if, for the first time, the town isn't choosing the next victim? The characters are choosing the next prisoner.